Hey, how's it going? This is my Nintendo Switch 2. I picked this bad boy up on launch day and did a first impressions video about 10 months ago, I believe. And since it's come out, I just figured I'd come back and do a more long-term review as promised in my initial impressions video. Okay, so if you've already seen my initial impressions video on the Switch 2, honestly, not a lot of my thoughts and opinions on that system have really changed. That said, I do think it's important to kind of zoom out a little bit, especially when we talk about whether or not the Switch 2 is worth buying, or whether or not it's worth upgrading your Switch 1 to the Switch 2. There's a lot of factors at play, and I do think, especially with it being, almost a year since the system has come out, I do think it's important to be a little bit more nuanced with the discussion, and so that's what I'm going to try to do here. If there's one objectively good thing to say about the Switch 2 in comparison to the Switch 1, it's that its hardware upgrade across the board is just a noticeable improvement. The increased size in both the screen and Joy-Con are just a huge plus, and in general, there's just a much more premium refinement to this overall system experience than compared to the original Switch. Where the original Switch took a proof of concept and did a great job at execution, the Switch 2 basically took that formula and refined almost every sector of it. I mean, this is just a side note, but like the experience of now just slapping your Joy-Con in magnetically and this little lever button thing, just popping it off with ease, and the fact that it stays on real snug, my God, I hope whoever came up with this mechanism has the coldest of pillows every night. It's just fantastic. And honestly, almost a detriment at times, because I'll be playing my Switch and just kind of finding myself fidgeting with the Joy-Con because it's just so damn satisfying. While the larger system is nicer to hold in the hands ergonomically, it still kind of sucks. And so I did end up actually picking up these slick little Joy-Con grips that just slide right on, and that honestly has made my handheld experience so much better. And of course, in terms of internal hardware, this thing just runs circles around the original Switch. The fact that this thing can run Resident Evil 9 and still look pretty darn good, albeit not as good as the other system counterparts, it's still great to see that you can have a solid AAA experience on a system like this. As a side note too, in terms of controllers, the Switch 2 Pro controller is just so nice. I really like the premium feel of this controller, and honestly probably has some of the best feeling thumbsticks that I've ever experienced on a controller. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Felt like it was worth mentioning. We'll get into the software side of things in a little bit, but just for the Switch 2 hardware, things like the handheld boost mode, boosting the performance and visuals on original Switch games when playing the Switch 2 in handheld mode is a really nice feature. I've been doing another Tears of the Kingdom run and playing initially on the original Switch, now playing on the Switch 2, especially in docked mode. There's just a noticeable visual and frame rate improvement, and it's so nice. I do honestly think the internal upgrades from the Switch 2 have been really positive, especially taking advantage of the DLSS from the NVIDIA chip. I think it's been a solid choice overall, and I have noticed a discernible improvement in a lot of backlog games and games that, have that Switch 1 or Switch 2 port. There is a noticeable visual improvement. Now, as much as I love the Switch 2 hardware, both in terms of its overall user experience and its graphical upgrade and performance and blah, 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 the games. This is the major point of contention that a lot of people have. It's the games, or the lack thereof. I think a lot of people have valid points when they say there aren't any games for the Switch 2. I will push back on that claim. I don't fully subscribe to that claim, but I do think the point is valid. With the Switch 2 early on, I spent a lot of time playing DK Bonanza. It really scratched that Mario Odyssey itch for me. Not the biggest Donkey Kong fan, to be honest. Do kind of wish that it was just a mainline Mario title, but the destruction mechanics and just kind of the light-hearted story of the game, it was a lot of fun. It just, very classic 3D platformer sort of Nintendo game. I definitely enjoyed it. I kind of wish it was a launch title for the system, but I do think it's probably the best title right now in terms of exclusives. I also spent a decent amount of time playing some Wind Waker, which is, part of that GameCube Nintendo Switch Online expansion deal. And that is a service only available for the Switch 2. If you're a big GameCube fan, then yeah, that's definitely something worth considering. Mario Kart World is a fun game, not entirely a system seller for me, but I still had fun with it nonetheless. But surprisingly to me, Pokopia was probably my favorite game so far that is exclusive to the Switch 2. Cozy games are kind of not really my thing. And I think maybe part of this might be the fact that it's just Pokemon, so there's some nostalgia there for me that really kind of hits home. I've never used the word adorable to describe a game before, but yeah, Pokopia is definitely in that category for me. Just a very chill, relaxing, fun game, and definitely worth getting if you have a Switch 2. When it comes to consoles, most people buy consoles for their exclusives, right? They'll either buy them for the exclusives or they'll buy it because it's what their friends are playing on. And I think especially when it comes to Nintendo, the vast majority of people are buying Nintendo games primarily, if not exclusively, for the exclusive first-party titles. When it comes to like the perception of mainline Nintendo games exclusive for the Nintendo Switch 2, you really only have 4 games. You have Mario Kart World, you have Donkey Kong Bonanza, you have Kirby Air Riders, and then you have Pokopia. Is that it? Honestly, these aren't all terrible games. They're all perfectly good games. When you're talking about those 4 games on their own and ask the question, are those 4 games enough to warrant buying a Switch 2? I think for a lot of people, that answer is no. Now, before you start typing away, I know there are games like Pokemon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4 that have come out for the Switch 2, but those are also games that have been released alongside with the Switch 1 as well. If given the choice, I would obviously recommend buying the Switch 2 versions of those games. But again, we're here to ask the question, is it worth upgrading to a Switch 2? And yeah, I think we really need to focus on the exclusive titles when we're talking about upgrading from one system to another. Now, I'm someone who's very fortunate enough to have all the major systems, right? I have a decent game PC, I have a Series X, a PS5, and I have, for handhelds, I have a PS Portal, a Steam Deck, and obviously the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2.
Get a life. Get a life.
And I say all that to give context that it's really easy for someone with my privilege to say that the Switch 2 collects dust for me from time to time. It's not my main system. It might not be worth upgrading to right away because as far as the exclusive titles are concerned, there's not a whole lot for me to enjoy just yet. But I'm an enthusiast, right? And so I have all these systems, but I don't think that's how most people are. If the Switch is your only system, and you are interested in getting a Switch 2 and you're wondering if it's worth the upgrade, go ahead and pick up a Switch 2 if you can. Especially with the potential price increases looming over our heads, I think it's worth picking up. If the Switch 1 is your main system and you are ready to buy, I think the Switch 2 is a definite good upgrade for you at that point. And while there might not be a ton of like genuine exclusive Switch 2 games out just yet, there's a lot of third-party stuff and the dual releases of games. The Switch 2 version is always the better version to buy. Again, if you're a Switch 1 owner and that's your primary system, I'd say just go for it. Where I also think the Switch 2 is a really compelling option is for people who are looking for a sort of secondary handheld system. Maybe you were someone who used the Switch as your on-the-go gaming device. That is another area where I think the Switch 2 can really shine for people in their use case. The Switch 2 has a fair bit of third-party games like Cyberpunk 2077, Resident Evil 9, or even Star Wars Outlaws. These are games that for a lot of people are worth getting if you don't have a way to play them in a handheld fashion. I mean, I remember myself so many times with the original Switch playing a bunch of third-party games, even games that I have already played. I rebought games for that system simply because of the fact that, I may have played BioShock 500 times, but you know what? I never got to play it in a handheld fashion. And now we're seeing that even a bit more now with some of these newer games coming out that are playable on the Switch 2 and not playable on the Switch 1. The Steam Deck was kind of my go-to on-the-go device for a while, but honestly, the Switch just travels better in my opinion, and I can still charge it efficiently with a standard phone charger. Can't really do that the same way with my Steam Deck. If you're in the market for a handheld system and you're comparing the Steam Deck and the Switch 2, the Steam Deck technically on paper is the better option. It's got a much bigger library of games, and with it being a handheld PC, it's got more functionality than the Switch 2 will ever have. And while I technically enjoy and play my Steam Deck more than my Switch 2, I can't deny that the Switch 2 is a much more seamless experience, and when docking the Switch versus docking the Steam Deck, it just looks so much better on the TV. Also, probably important to mention that it's pretty damn impossible to find a Steam Deck right now. Unless you want to buy something used or pay more on the secondhand market. As of recording this video, you cannot currently buy the Steam Deck on Steam, which really sucks. Until there's a proper successor to the Steam Deck, I can easily see myself start to drift more and more towards the Switch 2 as my sort of main handheld system of choice. As far as my thoughts go with the Nintendo Switch 2, my long-term review, I still really like this system. My initial impressions haven't changed a whole lot, but honestly, as a system, it's a solid upgrade. I consider it to be more of a pro model than a direct successor, at least for the time being. For a lot of people, I think they will find great benefits in picking up this system. If you're someone who doesn't have a Switch, buy the Switch 2. There's a plethora of backlog titles on the original Switch, as well as new games on the Switch 2 that will fill up your time with great games to play. And I think that's a no-brainer purchase. If you're someone who already has a Switch and is on the fence about getting a Switch 2, well, then you got to do a little bit more soul searching. I'm typically of the belief that if you have the funds to buy something and it's something that really piques your interests, even if you're on the fence, I usually am of the camp to just buy the thing, because at least that honeymoon phase and tinkering and discovering the new system is already a fun experience. And in the case of the Switch 2, you can still use it to play all of your older games, and you'll still have a good time with it. I really don't want to be the person to say that you should buy into FOMO regarding the tariff situation and potential price hikes of the Switch 2, but that's also something to consider. There's a lot of talk that the Switch 2 is likely going to increase in price. So, you know, I don't typically like making my purchasing decisions that way, but with the reality of the way things are going right now, that's also something to consider. This video was a bit more rambly than I intended it to be, but regardless, I do hope it was of some help to some of you out there. If you do have any questions about the Switch 2, any questions about something that I may not have talked about in this video, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer any and all questions that I can. As always, let us know if you like this type of content or not by hitting that appropriate like or dislike button. Get subscribed to the channel to stay up to date on everything that we're doing. And yeah, that's about enough rambling out of me. Thank you again so much for watching this video and checking out the channel. My name is Blake, and until next time, y'all have a good one.